streaming orientation is going to be working. I think that if this is being watched on a computer or even on full screen on a phone, this will be more pleasant for the viewer. However, it will not allow for too accessible of a chat, I don't think. But I was kind of inspired while cleaning the house this morning to talk about how did the EAR get into these places? Now, this house that I'm going to be walking towards with you is not in the prime geographic location to simulate or otherwise illustrate the type of target house that would be selected by the EARONS towards the end of the prowling reconnaissance phase of his activities in an area. But this house that I'm going to take you to was built in 1962, so it's in Southern California. It's right around period time about like what types of houses EAR would have been aiming for. Now, if this house were on a corner, if this house were, best way to put this, and I've explained this a lot of times with people, but a really a solid, hello baby, I love you, a really solid approximate understanding of an EAR target location would be basically one house over from the first row of houses on a street. That house needs to have a backyard that connects to the house that connects, or that's on the row of houses on the same side of on the street. So let's say you have Avenue A runs like this. House row A connects to Avenue A, but also backs up to house row B, and house row B is where the actual strike will occur. So you're insulated one layer of houses from, one layer of houses from the from the street, from the main access street. But then on the back side of all of this would be usually some kind of a canal, a communications corridor, a creek bed. It's you know, municipal sort of sewer or drainage type area, and so that allows, and that drainage area is gonna back up to loads and loads of other neighborhoods. That drainage area is that initial reconnaissance route. In Irvine, it can be seen as the bike trails along Jeffrey Road, for example. You know, in those early Rancho Cordova attacks, it's going to be the houses running along the American River and the canals and the levees of the American River. And so there's always going to be this larger geographic sort of reconnaissance corridor. All as this reconnaissance is narrowed down, everything is specified in this modus operandi down to the position and the type of the individual house. Why this modus operandi was so recognizable and so easy to detect, because it's so specific and it has so many practitioner's mindset. So let's talk about the actual house. Now, this house is not in the right spot for what would have been hit by the EAR. But if we imagine that it is in the right geographic spot, it's the same type of house that would have been hit by the EAR. And we'll give you an understanding. This is built in 1962. I'm sure very little has been changed. And it gives you that understanding of, you know, what were the fences that he was jumping. I mean, there's people not from these areas that might have these questions. I'm in Southern California, and so I can give you a really good approximate understanding of the types of fences, the types of security measures or entry and exit points for the house. So here's one of the side gate. This is of the type that would be left open by EAR. So when you hear about, oh, the side gate was left open as a secondary point of escape, this is exactly what that means. Now, it could be left open to a lesser extent, and probably would be. It would probably be left open only about that much. This one, I guess, moves on its own a little bit. And he might have even put something to prop it there, just because you don't want it to be seen from the road as being open, which it wouldn't, until I guess maybe that, but it's still pretty subtle. A lot of this type of activity would be set up during the daytimes. Now, to give you an understanding of reconnaissance prowling hours, those reconnaissance prowling hours are essentially 8 p.m. to 12. There's about a 3.5-4 hour window of reconnaissance prowling hours. After about that time, after about 12 o'clock, you're starting to get into intrusion hours. And these are generally happening, 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. So to bring you along the side route, now this is the same type of fence. I'm about 5'11", so I'm about the same height as the EAR. So to give that means the fence size and everything next to him, let me show you. So when you hear tales of him jumping over fences in a single bound, this can give you some understanding of how tall are those fences, what do they look like. They generally look a lot like this. This is a California period built home. So, if you want to jump over one of these fences. Now, the other thing that I would say about these fences, by the way, and it has been 50 years, 40 years since the EAR was active, is I wouldn't really want to try to trust one of these fences jumping over it. I would go over the concrete area right here, because it just immediately on putting any kind of weight on this, and I know it's been 40 years, but immediately upon putting any kind of weight on this, I'm hearing cracking sounds, all kinds of stuff. So I wouldn't really put my weight on that. I would probably jump over this area. So that might give you an understanding of what does it mean to jump fences, EAR. Basically that. Notice I thought was interesting, and I don't know if I've ever really heard this been said at all. And I've read through basically every thread ever put on the pro boards, and it might have been mentioned. I'd have to run a Control F on it, but I'll give you an idea. I've never heard crawl spaces be mentioned before. Not sure what kind of advantage that might have served to him, if that ever did serve as an advantage to him, but it's just something to think about. Crawl spaces were present on the homes of that era. So this is the kind of backyard that EAR would have been, traversing. And you can see here the way that other houses back right up to it, and it allows for blocks of travel through residential areas, completely insulated from the street. So if you know which, this type of activity that was happening required extremely heavy reconnaissance. Now, and I love you so much too. Those in. Okay, to really hit the nail on the head here. That's why all of these attacks were clusters. All of them. At Concord, the Contra Costa County area, San Jose, all of these places were basically smaller clusters. And that was because familiarity with these areas was of the utmost importance for the AR. To go into this house here where I just took you through the backyard, I'd have to know, if I jump the fence over back into this house here, what street is it going to lead me out towards? And that information is only acquired through extensive prowling and obsessive research. This offender was extremely methodical, and considered his killings and his attacks to be a military operation, or a military style operation. That's the main key takeaway from an offender like the EARONS. Obviously, there's other motivations, but the strikes themselves are a covert military style operation. And I think that if it had been investigated, that looked at it like that, but that's still on streets like this, most of the time people are at work. So there's a lot of your early messing with things, but not necessarily prowling. Though I guess you could consider it prowling, and it is considered prowling. But there's distinct types of EAR activity. Prowlings are going to be those things where he's doing clusters of break-ins near an attack house, and I think that was all part of the ritual for him. I don't think that served much of a tactical purpose, because in fact all it really did was bring heat down on an area. And so I think there's something interesting to be said in wondering why there were clusters of burglaries in the immediate area preceding strikes, because those times really all they did was bring more risk to the offender. So that's been live from Spinning Ball.